Secret interviews have just surfaced. Deep within the vault of the most notorious scandal of our time, the Federal Bureau of Investigation held onto explosive testimonies regarding Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein. The Department of Justice declared the investigation closed, sealing the vault and assuring the public that every single document had been released. They lied. Right now, a catastrophic cover-up is unraveling before our eyes. 3 highly classified interview reports, buried by the very officials sworn to uphold the law, have just been leaked to the press. These are not rumors. These are official documents detailing severe and credible allegations of assault involving a minor. Agents found the witness so credible that they conducted multiple intense interrogations, meticulously documenting every horrific detail. Yet, when the time came to release the Epstein files to the public, these specific reports mysteriously vanished. The officials in charge, led by the Attorney General, deliberately withheld them, attempting to scrub the record clean. The facade of transparency has completely shattered. The supposed release of all records was a calculated deception. Investigative journalists and lawmakers have now discovered that over 40,000 documents are actively being hidden from the American people. Videos are missing. Audio recordings are missing. Flight logs are missing. The absolute sheer panic radiating from the highest levels of government is palpable, because the very people tasked with delivering justice are the ones orchestrating the concealment. This is no longer a partisan issue. The outrage is spilling across the political divide. Lawmakers who typically defend the administration are now openly revolting, successfully pushing subpoenas to drag the Attorney General before the Oversight Committee. The walls are closing in on a regime that thought it could bury the truth beneath a mountain of redacted pages and smug denials. The cover-up was sloppy, the lies are exposed, and the fallout is poised to be the most devastating political earthquake we have witnessed in modern history. Hello and welcome to United States News Daily. We are dedicated to bringing you the unfiltered truth behind the headlines, cutting through the noise to expose what is really happening in Washington. If you want to stay ahead of the narrative and never miss a breaking update on this developing crisis, please subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so we can keep you informed every single day. The investigative reporting from the Miami Herald, spearheaded by veteran journalist Julie K. Brown, completely shattered the official narrative of a closed case. Through relentless digging and unwavering persistence, sources operating deep within the Department of Justice confirmed the existence of explosive internal records. These are not mere memos. They are the standard interview forms utilized by the Federal Bureau of Investigation, known internally as Form 302. These specific documents represent the absolute holy grail of federal investigations, serving as the official, contemporaneous record of witness testimonies collected by sworn agents. For many months, the public was fed a carefully constructed illusion, led to believe that every relevant piece of paper regarding the sprawling trafficking network had been turned over to congressional committees and the media. Yet, these critical forms, containing devastating allegations against Donald Trump, were systematically and surgically extracted from the massive document dumps. The contents of these withheld reports detail encounters so severe they demand immediate, unfiltered scrutiny. According to the federal agents who authored the reports, a witness came forward with harrowing claims dating back to a period when she was still a minor. She detailed a deeply disturbing sequence of events involving the former president, alleging severe physical assault and inappropriate conduct. The specifics, meticulously recorded by the investigating agents, outline a scenario where she was forced into an unthinkable position. The witness recounted her desperate, instinctual attempt to defend herself, stating she bit him in retaliation to the assault because his actions utterly disgusted her. In response to her resistance, according to her sworn testimony, he reacted violently, pulling her hair and striking her on the side of her head. Federal law enforcement agents do not simply take a single, explosive statement and file it away into obscurity, especially when dealing with allegations of this magnitude involving high-profile, powerful individuals. The investigative reporting clearly indicates that the Federal Bureau of Investigation brought this woman in for questioning not just once, not twice, but for 3 separate, exhaustive interviews. During the final session, she explicitly clarified the physical altercation, ensuring the agents completely understood the exact nature of the assault and the ensuing violence. Legal experts and internal sources have made it abundantly clear. Seasoned federal agents would never invest the extensive time, resources, and manpower required to conduct multiple, deeply probing interrogations unless they found the witness to be highly credible. They tested her story, probed her memory for inconsistencies, and ultimately documented her trauma as a substantive piece of evidence within the broader Jeffrey Epstein trafficking probe. The deliberate suppression of these 3 specific interview reports exposes a glaring, undeniable contradiction that strikes directly at the heart of the ongoing political and legal firestorm. Donald Trump has consistently, vociferously, and vehemently denied any meaningful relationship with the disgraced financier. He has repeatedly stated to the international press and the American public that he barely knew the man, categorically claiming he never set foot on the private planes and possessed absolutely no knowledge of the illicit, criminal activities occurring behind closed doors. He dismissed all allegations from all victims as pure fiction, labeling the entire ordeal an orchestrated witch hunt designed specifically to derail his political ambitions and damage his reputation. However, the resurfaced federal documents paint a drastically different, significantly darker reality. The sheer existence of these credible, thoroughly vetted witness statements directly challenges those blanket public denials. If the former president truly had zero connection to the sprawling criminal enterprise, and if the allegations were entirely fabricated, the logical, standard course of action for a transparent justice system would be to release the files in their entirety and let the cold, hard evidence speak for itself. Instead, the apparatus of the highest law enforcement agency in the land went into absolute overdrive to bury these specific testimonies. The meticulous effort required to locate, extract, and hide these exact interview reports from a staggering trove of millions of documents strongly suggests a highly coordinated, intentional effort to protect a specific individual from public ruin and legal accountability. This profound revelation forces a critical re-evaluation of every single statement the public has been told regarding this investigation. When a powerful, globally recognized figure claims absolute, unwavering innocence while simultaneously, the very governmental agencies tasked with investigating him actively conceal the primary evidence contradicting his claims, the entire foundation of institutional trust disintegrates. The targeted suppression of these witness testimonies transforms a story of alleged past crimes into a real-time, unfolding scandal of systemic corruption. The mechanics of the cover-up are now just as significant, if not more so, than the original crimes being investigated. Every missing document, every heavily redacted page, and every hidden interview form serves as a silent, damning admission of guilt, not solely of the accused, but of the entire system that consciously chose to act as an impenetrable shield rather than an impartial sword of justice. The architecture of the defense is collapsing in real time. The facade of absolute cooperation crumbled the exact moment the Attorney General released an official memorandum designed to abruptly terminate all public inquiry. Standing shoulder to shoulder with top administrative allies, including key figures like Kash Patel, the chief of the Department of Justice confidently proclaimed to the American people that the sweeping investigation was entirely concluded. The message was delivered with clinical precision, insisting that every single piece of evidence had been laid bare, demanding that citizens and journalists alike accept the findings and abandon their relentless scrutiny. They packaged this announcement as a monumental victory for transparency. It was, in reality, a calculated performance meant to serve as the definitive final chapter of a sprawling, sinister saga. They expected the collective outrage to simply dissolve, assuming the public would blindly consume the official narrative without asking the hard, dangerous questions. They severely miscalculated the tenacity of independent watchdogs. Within days of that premature declaration of absolute transparency, the entire narrative collapsed under the weight of glaring, undeniable inconsistencies. Investigative reporters from major syndicates, including National Public Radio and the Wall Street Journal, began meticulously dissecting the massive data dumps provided by the government. Instead of finding a complete, unredacted archive, they discovered a heavily sanitized, fragmented puzzle designed to obscure rather than reveal. Journalists quickly identified missing sequential markings at the bottom of the provided paperwork, a catastrophic administrative error that inadvertently served as a map to the buried secrets. When tracking the identification stamps, gaping holes appeared in the investigative timeline. The sheer volume of the concealed material was staggering. Initial estimates pointed to over 40,000 missing files. Overnight, that number swelled closer to 47,000 individual documents, completely contradicting the sworn assurances delivered by the highest-ranking law enforcement officers in the nation. The attempt to quietly sweep the remaining evidence under the rug had spectacularly backfired, drawing an immense, burning spotlight directly onto the mechanics of the suppression itself. The sheer sloppiness of the concealment effort ignited a firestorm that rapidly incinerated traditional political boundaries. In the highly polarized environment of the national capital, scandals are almost always weaponized along strict party lines, with loyalists fiercely defending their appointed leaders regardless of the optic fallout. However, the blatant manipulation of such a universally despised criminal enterprise proved too toxic even for the most dedicated loyalists to defend. The botched attempt to scrub the archives did not merely expose the administration to attacks from their traditional political rivals. It deeply humiliated the rank-and-file members of their own party who had previously assured their constituents that true justice would finally be served. The protective shield of partisan loyalty completely shattered. The individuals tasked with executing the cover-up had bungled the operation so severely that they transformed themselves into massive political liabilities. The most devastating blow to the Attorney General did not materialize from the opposition benches, but rather originated directly from within her own political faction. Republican Congresswoman Nancy Mace, a figure who had historically aligned with the broader administrative agenda, publicly erupted in unvarnished fury. She recognized that the clumsy manipulation of the document release was severely damaging the credibility of every elected official associated with the ruling party. Stepping directly into the media spotlight, the Congresswoman delivered a scathing indictment of the Department of Justice, fundamentally altering the trajectory of the standoff. Her words stripped away any remaining veneer of institutional respectability. She declared unequivocally that the administration had not released all the files, directly branding the situation as one of the greatest organized cover-ups in American history. Her public statement was a masterclass in righteous indignation, dismantling the official narrative piece by piece. She explicitly highlighted the staggering discrepancies, pointing out that while 3 million documents might have been pushed into the public domain, the most damning, visceral evidence remained locked away in federal vaults. She methodically listed the missing components, emphasizing that crucial video recordings, sensitive audio tapes, and detailed flight logs were intentionally vanished from the public record. She demanded to know why the justice system was prioritizing the protection of powerful, highly connected individuals over delivering long overdue answers to the survivors and the American public. This internal rebellion transformed a simmering controversy into a full-blown constitutional crisis. Driven by the undeniable evidence of missing records and fueled by the righteous anger of lawmakers from both sides of the aisle, the legislative branch took unprecedented action. The House Oversight Committee, driven by an overwhelming, bipartisan demand for the unvarnished truth, officially moved to issue a binding congressional subpoena directly targeting the Attorney General. This was not a polite request for a voluntary appearance. It was a legally enforceable command, compelling the head of the justice system to sit before a hostile panel and explain exactly how and why tens of thousands of highly sensitive documents related to a global trafficking network were purposely hidden from the world. The issuance of this subpoena marked a critical point of no return. It represented a fundamental collision between the executive branch's desire to bury inconvenient truths and the legislative branch's constitutional duty to expose them. The architects of the cover-up were now trapped by their own careless execution, forced to defend the indefensible under the brutal, unforgiving glare of sworn congressional testimony. The trap they had inadvertently set for themselves was finally springing shut, setting the stage for an explosive, highly publicized showdown that threatens to tear the remaining credibility of the justice system down to its very foundation. The appearance before the congressional panel was anticipated to be a rigorous defense of executive decisions, yet it rapidly devolved into a surreal spectacle of evasion. When directly confronted with deeply disturbing questions regarding the suppressed records of a prolific sex offender and the alleged ties to a former president, the highest-ranking legal official in the nation chose a deeply unorthodox defensive posture. Instead of citing legal precedent, invoking executive privilege, or providing a coherent administrative rationale for the missing documents, she completely pivoted the conversation to financial markets. With a dismissive smirk, she repeatedly pointed out that a major stock market index had recently crossed the 50,000 mark. This was not a subtle attempt to change the subject. It was a jarring, almost theatrical refusal to acknowledge the gravity of the accusations being levied against her department. The complete disconnect between a sprawling criminal enterprise involving vulnerable minors and the daily fluctuations of corporate stock prices left observers and lawmakers completely bewildered. Every single attempt to steer the dialogue back to the concealed evidence was met with the exact same robotic, entirely unrelated financial statistic. Legal analysts and seasoned political observers, including those who have spent decades navigating federal structures, immediately recognized the profound miscalculation in her demeanor. Her testimony was completely devoid of the polished, slippery evasion typically employed by skilled bureaucrats under intense fire. Instead, she adopted a highly antagonistic, combative tone that violently grated on the nerves of everyone present in the legislative chamber. She delivered her bizarre non-sequiturs with a dripping sarcasm that many commentators described as physically uncomfortable to watch. It was a remarkably toxic combination of treating a devastatingly serious inquiry as a silly joke, while simultaneously lashing out with venomous hostility against anyone demanding basic accountability. This hyper-aggressive posture completely backfired. Rather than projecting strength or impenetrable partisan loyalty, it radiated a desperate, chaotic energy. It created an atmosphere where even entirely neutral observers could clearly sense that something was structurally and fundamentally wrong within the highest echelons of the justice apparatus. Her complete lack of professional grace transformed an already difficult hearing into an unmitigated public relations disaster. The sheer incompetence displayed during this deeply public performance inflicted massive collateral damage on her own political allies. Lawmakers who share her partisan affiliation were left completely exposed, forced to return to their home districts and attempt to justify why their appointed administrative champion was acting like a cornered amateur on national television broadcasts. They desperately expected a rigorous, legally sound defense that they could utilize as a political shield against mounting public outrage. What they received instead was an embarrassing display of unearned arrogance that made the entire political faction look directly complicit in a clumsy, poorly executed cover-up. By treating the legislative oversight process with such blatant, sneering contempt, she transformed a debate about administrative document retention into a glaring, unavoidable spotlight on executive hubris. Her profoundly bizarre strategy might have been specifically designed to please a single audience member residing entirely outside of the capital city, but it effectively alienated the very congressional coalition she desperately needed to survive the escalating institutional warfare. Her toxic unlikability has stripped away any remaining political cover her allies might have been willing to provide. This remarkably disastrous performance directly precipitated the current escalating crisis. Recognizing her profound vulnerability and the massive public backlash generated by her unbridled arrogance, the Oversight Committee did not retreat. They aggressively doubled down on their demands. They issued a highly specific, legally targeted command compelling her to return and face a methodical, itemized interrogation focused exclusively and relentlessly on the vanished trafficking files. The single critical question now hovering heavily over the Capitol is how she will strategically respond to this new legally binding directive. Complying means voluntarily submitting to a brutal, inescapable cross-examination where clumsy deflection tactics involving stock market indices will absolutely no longer be tolerated by the panel. Defying the legal order, however, immediately initiates a catastrophic constitutional standoff between co-equal branches of government. Refusal to appear would normally trigger a formal contempt motion, creating a seemingly impossible scenario where the Federal Justice Department would be legally obligated to actively prosecute its own central leader. The heavy, unbroken silence currently emanating from her office in the wake of the latest summons is absolutely deafening, signaling a high-stakes internal calculation regarding whether to finally face the gathering storm or intentionally detonate a completely unprecedented legal meltdown. The abrupt political execution of a prominent Midwestern governor provides a chilling blueprint for the crisis currently paralyzing federal law enforcement. Her sudden downfall was never triggered by a massive policy failure or the widespread public disgust over her highly publicized, deeply controversial personal cruelties. The actual transgression that vaporized her national ambitions was astonishingly petty. She commissioned a television advertisement. Specifically, she released a promotional campaign featuring herself riding a horse, prominently showcasing her own leadership while critically failing to include the former president in the footage. That single, seemingly minor omission of absolute, groveling deference was internally classified as an unforgivable act of political treason. She was unceremoniously discarded not for malicious governmental conduct, but for the fundamental failure to properly center the supreme leader within her personal public relations strategy. This brutal historical precedent casts a dark, foreboding shadow directly over the current Attorney General. The unwritten rule governing this highly specific political ecosystem is total, flawless obedience, coupled with the mandatory requirement to operate as an impenetrable human shield. The central political figure does not care about the moral or ethical implications of hiding documents related to a sprawling abuse network. He only cares that the concealment is executed with absolute, silent perfection so his own legacy remains entirely untarnished. The current head of the Justice Department is spectacularly failing that exact, unwritten mandate. She was elevated to her position to seamlessly manage the fallout, to quietly sweep the devastating testimonies into the dark, and to project a masterful aura of total administrative control. Instead, her staggering, highly visible incompetence has thrust the exact scandal she was supposed to bury into the blinding, unforgiving glare of the national spotlight. By bungling the document suppression so thoroughly, she has committed the exact same fatal error as the ousted governor, but on a vastly more destructive and public scale. Her clumsy deflections and arrogant congressional testimonies have not protected the leader. They have made the entire administration look incredibly weak, deeply disorganized, and blatantly complicit in a horrific cover-up. The political apparatus she serves possesses zero tolerance for loyalists who inadvertently transform themselves into massive liabilities. In an environment where loyalty is purely transactional and self-preservation is the only genuine ideology, a botched offense is virtually indistinguishable from open betrayal. The panicked whispers currently echoing through the hidden corridors of power are no longer debating whether she will survive the incoming congressional onslaught. Instead, the calculations revolve entirely around how quickly she will be publicly sacrificed to appease the mounting, uncontrollable fury of the exact man she so miserably failed to protect. If a simple horseback riding television commercial was enough to permanently end a promising career, the catastrophic, highly public mishandling of the most explosive criminal archive in modern political history guarantees an impending, ruthless political exile. The only variable remaining is the precise moment the trapdoor will finally open. The systematic transformation of the national justice apparatus into a private defense firm has triggered a catastrophic collapse in public confidence. By openly treating the highest law enforcement agency as a personal shield, the administration has fundamentally alienated the electorate. Approval metrics are plummeting to historic depths as citizens watch the foundational pillars of blind justice crumble in real time. The populace is no longer merely frustrated. They are deeply disgusted by the blatant weaponization of federal power to protect a single individual from the devastating fallout of a sprawling abuse network. This internal rot is severely weakening the administration, pushing their political survival to the absolute brink and forcing them to seek drastic, external solutions to shift the overwhelming media narrative. When domestic scandals reach a terminal velocity, embattled administrations frequently look to the global stage to manufacture a distraction. A sudden, highly volatile escalation in international conflict provides the perfect smokescreen to bury a domestic crisis. Geopolitical analysts and investigative journalists are currently identifying a highly suspicious correlation between the catastrophic unsealing of the suppressed trafficking documents and the abrupt intensification of hostilities overseas. The drumbeat of war is growing progressively louder, specifically targeting a long-standing adversary. Initiating a severe military standoff effectively hijacks the news cycle, forcing networks to pivot away from investigative reporting on missing federal files and focus entirely on troop movements and international threats. The terrifying reality is that sending armed forces into a foreign conflict might be a calculated, cynical maneuver to drown out the deafening roar of a monumental legal cover-up back home. This desperate geopolitical gambit has birthed a profound and deeply humiliating national irony. As the administration attempts to project overwhelming military dominance abroad to distract from the rot within, foreign leaders are eagerly weaponizing the domestic scandal against them. In a bizarre twist of fate, the supreme spiritual and political leader of the targeted adversary nation has actively inserted himself into the discourse surrounding the buried interview files. From halfway across the globe, this foreign adversary is publicly taunting the administration, loudly broadcasting the exact same trafficking allegations that federal agents are so desperately trying to hide. He is using the suppressed evidence as a psychological weapon to undermine the moral authority of the government on the global stage. This creates an incredibly surreal and deeply uncomfortable psychological dilemma for the ordinary citizen. Watching an international rival accurately call out the corruption of the highest office forces individuals into a staggering realization. They find themselves quietly nodding along with the harsh critiques delivered by a sworn enemy of the state, simply because that enemy is stating an undeniable truth that domestic officials refuse to acknowledge. It is a terrifying indicator of how far the institutional credibility has fallen when the public feels a foreign autocrat is providing a more accurate assessment of a domestic legal scandal than the appointed leaders of their own Justice Department. The manipulation of global stability for personal political preservation represents the ultimate betrayal of the social contract. Citizens entrust their leaders with the immense power of the military, expecting those forces to be deployed strictly for the defense of the nation, never as a public relations tool to obscure severe personal liabilities. The entire world is now watching as a domestic cover-up threatens to ignite a devastating international confrontation. The ultimate pursuit of truth must completely transcend rigid political affiliations. When the highest levels of government actively conspire to bury the darkest secrets of a sprawling criminal empire, demanding absolute transparency becomes a fundamental obligation for every citizen. The victims who endured unspeakable horrors deserve authentic justice, not a heavily redacted performance designed to shield powerful political figures from accountability. The walls are rapidly closing in on the architects of this massive concealment, and the impending congressional showdown will likely determine the survival of the current administration. The narrative is shifting rapidly, and public pressure is the only force capable of breaking the remaining silence. We want to hear your unfiltered thoughts on this escalating crisis. Tell us in the comment section below whether you believe the Attorney General will finally comply with the congressional subpoena or choose to ignite a completely unprecedented constitutional standoff. If you found this deep dive insightful, please share this broadcast across your social media networks and send it directly to your friends and family to help expose the hidden truth. Finally, please subscribe to United States News Daily so we can continue holding power accountable together.